let's kind of fast forward to present day. And like you alluded to it, when I look at the current version of the ACC, and now you got Stanford and Cal, and Stanford, had a down year last year, but they had just made 3 straight Omahas. And
Right.
in the heyday that we were just talking about 20 years ago, from 99 to 03, Stanford went to 5 straight Omahas, played in the national title game 3 out of 4 years. So they, the best version of Stanford obviously is a very imposing program. Cal has had, I think they've had like 4 first-round picks in the last 5 years. They have high-end talent just based on who they are and where they are. And, like as you had said, some of the programs that 20 years ago just were not invested in baseball, it really is that rising tide lifts all ships story. Duke has now been to 3 super regionals in the last year since 2018. And, Notre Dame, we always talk about Notre Dame with 2022 went to Omaha, but it's easy to forget in 2021, they were in game 3 of a super regional at Mississippi State. And, Boston College in 2016, they're in game 3 of a super. And 2023, I'd say they should have been a host, but they still were a regional team. Wake
Right.
Forest, obviously number 1 team in the country 2 years ago. Virginia Tech was a top 8 national seed in 22. And now we're in this era where the ACC, like I can tell you they're getting 8 teams in this year, if not more. And so here's where I want to start, Coach. Like I was talking to somebody the other day, and they said, who's going to Omaha this year? And I hadn't really thought about it yet. And even though I have great respect for the Big 12, there's no more Pac-12. The West Coast is kind of resetting itself. And I thought to myself, I think there'll be, of the 8 Omaha teams, I think it's going to be all ACC and SEC again. If it's not, it will take an upset for that not to happen. So, and it just, when I said it out loud, I was like, man, I don't love that, first of all. Like, I want it to be more parity. But then I was like, man, what a compliment to the ACC. Like, this league is right there with the SEC. So, yeah, like, go wherever you want with that, Coach. But, like, man, like 25 years ago, if I had told you that coming into the 2025 season, we all think it's going to be all ACC and SEC in Omaha, what would you have thought?
Well, I wouldn't have thought that probably,
Right.
but at the same time, what you have right now is you have an explosion of financial commitments from the schools in the SEC and the ACC
Mm-hmm.
in their facilities, in their technology, and all the recruiting things that the kids are looking for nowadays. Coaching salaries are starting to get better in the ACC. The SEC has always been ahead that way, but the ACC is starting to catch up that way. And you've got a myriad of good coaches. The facilities it's important now to all the athletic directors. And if you're going to stay at the top of the conference, any conference right now, you have to, if you're at the bottom or mid range of facilities, you're always thinking about what do I have to do to get myself back up into the recruiting mix for these players. And at
Yeah.
the same time, be able to attract fans and make our programs marketable and all those types of things. And so there's a lot of, there's a lot of competition to be the best. And you see it in football, you see it in basketball, and then you throw all this NIL stuff into it and transfer portal, and everybody's trying to grab the best players. And, so I can see that, I agree with you a lot. Yeah, I like to see a little parity. I want to see some, things throughout the country and some different people in Omaha, that kind of thing. But when you really think about it, the best chance to get to Omaha is teams from the SEC and teams from the ACC right now. And there's still other good conferences. There's good coaches. There's good programs. There's people who care.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want anybody to get off this podcast thinking all they're thinking about the ACC and the SEC, because, I'm a proponent for good college baseball throughout the country. I want everybody to have good programs and be successful and have an opportunity to get there, because that's what keeps the dream alive.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, that strong emphasis in facilities is at those schools in the ACC and the SEC.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, to your point, Coach, like I think the Big 12 with their new alignment is super exciting. Like I think it's going to be really cool. And,
Yeah.
Oregon and Oregon State, still outstanding programs. And, the Big 10 now will have this big cash infusion. And who knows what that's going to look like in baseball. And
Mhm.
On and on and on. The Sun Belt, very exciting. But
Right.
let's finish with this, Coach. Like, so you being at Clemson the last few years, so Clemson has had the two heartbreaks of the tournament 2 years in a row. And even though that's miserable and it's easy for me to say, I do think that serves the program, right? Like, I think if you go back and study any of the great programs, they've had to work through those types of defeats to get
Right.
to the real momentum of their program. But
Right.
obviously you guys had that 14-inning game with Tennessee 2 years ago, and an epic super regional with Florida last year. But here's why I think the ACC is so well positioned. To get to Omaha, you have to be ready to win those types of games. And right now, the ACC gives you 30 previews of that during the
Right.
regular season. The SEC gets 30 previews of that, like incredibly tense, like we could sweep or we could get swept. Like it's the margins are so thin. So,
Right.
but I don't know. Like I can romanticize that stuff too. But what's your thought on that, Coach? That like the 30 league games in the ACC have never been more difficult.
Well, I agree. And it's difficult to really get a full picture of where you're at during the regular season in the ACC and the SEC because there's a lot of teams you do not play.
Right.
And it's
That's a good
almost
point.
like in college football, because uh, there's so many teams now, 16 teams, and Clemson plays, I don't know, 9 conference games, 10 conference games, 8, whatever it is. That means you're not playing 5 teams. And the same thing with foot and baseball is you're not playing a few of the teams, and the same thing in the SEC. You're not playing a few of the teams, so it's difficult to really. Sometimes you miss the right guys, and sometimes you miss the wrong guys when they have a good year or a bad year. Um, but at the same time, you get 30 opportunities and 10 weekends to play against the very best competition, and it gives you a sneak preview of what it's going to look like. And I talked about make the MTA make the adjustment. I got another saying that's the diff, and the
Yeah.
difference between winning and losing is that much. We lost to Tennessee by that much. If he's safe at first base, we probably win that regional last year.
Yeah.
He's out by that much. They had to go back to replay. Look, there's just a little bit of space. They reverse it. He's out. We go into extra innings. We lose. The same thing this year. Everything's close. There's so much parity amongst the top teams when you get to that level. It comes down to a pitch. It comes down to a swing. You see it in the World Series. It comes down to one swing from Freddie Freeman the first night. It comes down to just the little things that make a big difference. And so you really just got to hit it right at the right time. You got to get a break or two. You got to do something small that makes a big difference in the game. You got to be absolutely prepared. You cannot, have those explosive bad innings, and your big players have to play. They have to get the big hits when they're supposed to. They have to make big pitches, and it comes down to having some horses who can perform in big situations. So I think there's a lot of parity, even though it may not be from the bottom of Division One baseball to the very top. But when you get to that certain level in college baseball, there is a lot of parity now,
Yeah.
and like I say, because of a little bit of NIL and the transfer portal and all that type of thing, and you're kind of seeing that in college football now.
Yeah, agreed.
So,
Yeah, that's great. Boy, Coach, I could keep you for 4 hours, but we won't do that to you. I want you to
well,
enjoy your.
sleep is overrated. I'm ready to go.
It is, but I want to say this, Coach. Like I think we're all very proud of where college baseball is today and the growth, and
Yeah,
but you know, your generation, that like you guys were head coaches in the 80s and 90s. I look at that coaching group, like your peer group in that time period, like we're riding momentum right now that you all created. Because back then, let's be honest, people didn't really care about college baseball, but you made people care. Like you and your peer coaches, you mentioned Wayne Graham, we go through the list. And, again, the Clemson program became so iconic. And, like I think about two of my favorite college baseball players ever are Khalil Green and Cam Canarella. whatever, 20 years apart. And then, your
Yeah.
2002 coaching staff that we talked about, there'll never be another coaching staff like that, right? Like it's just, your rivalries in the ACC. And again, there's always things we want to tweak about the sport, but it's so healthy. And again, like the growth has been so miraculous. And it all traces back to the 80s and 90s where you all were kind of on the front lines, just demanding that people take our sport seriously. And the fruits that we get to bear now are just remarkable.